Welcome, everyone, to the Most Accurate Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Brandon Niles, and with me are my excellent co-hosts, Jen Eakins and Chris Allen. As always, Chris, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to get into the discussion about this quarterback and running back class, and excited to have Staggs on. First time I've been able to do a show with him, so I'm excited all around. Jen, how you doing?
I'm doing well. We're talking rookies, so I'm basically here to not get fined.
Jen, not our biggest draft fan at 4 for 4, but always happy to come and talk and give us a little simmer down redraft advice to draft prospects. As Chris alluded to, this week we're lucky to be joined by our very own Anthony Staggs. You can follow Anthony on Twitter at StaggsNFL. Check out his mock draft over at 4for4.com. It's excellent. It's been updated 3 times. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. Nice to see you again. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. It's right in my wheelhouse right now. It's the crunch time for us. We've got about a week to put a final big board together for a couple different contests. So putting some final touches on that. There's a couple different contests that go hand in hand with that, trying to get, how many players you have in your top 100, top 150. And then, of course, the mock draft grading will be tons of fun this year. I'm feeling pretty confident, but I guess this is a year where not everyone feels as confident. Without those major quarterback players, people are feeling a little bit, that there could be some weird things happening in the top 10. So I'm excited to watch and get to talk about it, live with the guys here who will be doing a live broadcast for the draft for day 1 and day 2. So that'll be exciting.
Yeah, it's I'll be tuning in. I'm looking forward to watching it. One thing, like you alluded to, there's no Trevor Lawrence in this draft. We knew for 2 years Trevor Lawrence was going to be the first pick last year. We don't know this year. We're going to talk quarterbacks and running backs mostly today, but I know I want to ask you a little bit about your mock draft first. You've got the Jags taking Michigan pass rusher Aidan Hutchinson. Pass rusher seems to be a strength of this draft. On your big board, though, you have Kayvon Thibodeaux as your number 1 prospect, the pass rusher out of Oregon. Can you tell me a little bit about the pass rushers, why you think the Jags will go Hutchinson, and which one or why you like Thibodeaux the best?
Right now, Hutchinson is such a strong betting favorite that it's sort of a little bit against the grain to pick anybody else. Right now, the guy who's surging, though, and who's starting to show up on a lot more of the mocks as we get a little bit closer here is Travon Walker. He's a very toolsy player, though. Like, he's got skills, the production. Yeah, that's always going to be a question mark. You'd like your number 1 overall pick to have the skills, have the athleticism, and have the production. And with Aidan Hutchinson, you're basically getting a more athletic Bosa brother. Like, the dude's a bad dude. Like, there's no way about it. But, like, Kayvon Thibodeaux, the rumors swirling him are, work ethic, and he's a me guy. But 2 years ago, he just saw, Justin Herbert come out in the draft, be lackadaisical, things didn't matter to him, so maybe football didn't matter to him. So maybe he took a different edge. Maybe he just played it differently, played his cards differently. And, hey, to play defense, I think you got to have a little bit of that me personality, that want to, that ball's mine, that quarterback's mine. You got to have a little bit of that nasty in your game. So I'm fine with all the me talk, and especially when you're trying to sell yourself. You're not trying to sell the rest of your team to the NFL. You're trying to sell yourself to get that best possible draft pick. And Kayvon Thibodeaux is basically just the best pass rusher. Like, if I'm drafting someone number 1, that's what I'm looking for. Like, run defense be damned. But Questions about his motor and things like that seem to be getting a little bit overblown. I've got a friend who used to be on the Oregon staff, and they disagree with you. So that's that.
Also, if he lands in Detroit at number 2, which would be fun, I feel like that coaching staff motor is not going to be a problem.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes players have their own motors. Sometimes they get hyped up by the guys around them. There's different things that happen all the time, being internally motivated versus externally motivated. Hell, some of these dudes are even motivated by money, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Like, get yours, bro.
Get your
like,
bag.
let's go.
Yes.
I love it. As I mentioned, we're going to do a 2-parter pre-draft series here. We're going to talk running backs and quarterbacks today, prospects, favorite fits, things of that sort. Next week, we will have somebody else on and we'll talk wide receivers and tight ends. I figured it'd be best to split that instead of trying to jam it all into one episode. Anthony, let's start with running backs. Tell me a little bit about this class as a whole.
I mean, this class for me is really about 3 guys, and they're like second round grades. You've got Breece Hall, who's got all the production in the world. He caught 86 passes throughout his career. He's rushed for over 1,000 yards, scored 20 touchdowns last year. And just the whole package is sort of there to be had. And then he goes out and he runs real fast. He runs sub 4.4 at a pretty strong weight. So he's got sort of the total package, and you look at, athletic comps for him, and they're guys like Jonathan Taylor and Edgerrin James. Like Edgerrin James is my comp for him because he's just sort of got that smooth glide running style that not a lot of dudes have. He doesn't look like he's trying that hard, but he is like chunking up yards, and that's just something I love from a back. And then you have a couple other backs like Kenneth Walker, who has no receiving profile, so everybody's going to knock him down a bit, but he's by far the best runner only in this class, so that's exciting. As long as you can get over that receiving knock. And it's not that we don't know if he can do it, it's just that he wasn't asked to do it, right? Like, there's still in the range of outcomes that he becomes a very good pass catcher, because it's happened to guys before. Even Jonathan Taylor's out there now catching passes after not really doing it. And the third guy is Isaiah Spiller. He's got a ton of production at the SEC level, so he came out and ran a little bit slower at a little bit less of a weight than you wanted to see. So that was a little bit concerning, but he's got that 3-down versatility, and he also doesn't look like he's trying too hard. But, that long speed is going to be a question for teams.
So I wanted to focus on Breece Hall because I know that he's going to be the RB1 of this class, like for everybody. And you mentioned it at the start of your, the previous part, Staggs, in that we really don't see any of these guys going in the first round. Now, and I guess the part of what I want to ask you about is this more of a product of the quality of the player? Because like you just tossed out the comps for Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, Edgerrin James. But if you also look at the production, you would want to stack up Breece Hall with guys like Jonathan Taylor, with Najee Harris. I mean, if you look at what he was, I think, 3rd or 4th in terms of missed tackles forced just this past season. I think, like you mentioned, with his 86 targets, he had like 5 drops throughout his entire collegiate production. So he meets all the thresholds for being an elite prospect, but he's not going to have the same elite prospect grade or draft capital that we would similarly associate with them. And even guys like Saquon Barkley, Ezekiel Elliott, I mean, any of those guys that have come out that we've considered to be elite prospects. So where would you kind of stack these guys up? Like, would you take Breece Hall ahead of most of these guys like Najee Harris and so on and so forth? Or do you think that just looking at the way that he was able to produce at his time at, let's say, a relatively smaller school than some of the other guys that have gotten first round draft capital, I mean, do you think there's just more of a, hey, we should go ahead and just look at that production and take that as it is, and just look at Breece Hall as one of the better prospects to come out in some time?
Yeah, I think that's a very difficult question to answer, but I think that running back fit is really starting to, make its way across the NFL. Teams are using it, 2 or 3 backs now. So it's really just a byproduct of that, because in past years we'd be talking Breece Hall like he's a top 10, top 15 pick in the draft. But it seems like teams are starting to, figure it out pretty much at a league-wide level that these guys are somewhat replaceable. So they're not devoting as many assets to him. He has been getting some first-round buzz that's usually centered around the Bills and how the Bills think he could be the last piece to their sort of puzzle. Yeah, I see that. But then you get, a couple years ago, the Chiefs make a move at the end of the first round for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and that move doesn't work out. So now do they want to be the same type of team who goes out and makes a similar move, and maybe it's a mistake when they could play it safe and draft another corner and try to keep up with the AFC West arms race? So that's going to be a major question. And then after that, there just seems to be a lot of backfields around the league that are more that have at least one guy right now. Some teams got 2, some teams got 3, and they like their depth. So it just seems like there's been a lot of good backs that have entered the league, with the depths of class. And this class might be a little bit more top heavy than, some of the more recent classes. But guys have been producing with late round draft capital and, being asked to fill specific roles like, Ramondre Stevenson and other backs that have come out in the last couple of years in the, late, 4th to 7th round draft capital.
And for Breece Hall specifically, where do you see him kind of being the best fit? It maybe if not for NFL purposes, because like you were discussing, it might be more about the fit or the schematic fit for that particular player. But I know in your article that you've got over at 4for4, folks, definitely check that out. You have him mocked to the Cardinals. I mean, is that still the case, or do you think there might be just a different spot for him?
I mean, there's a lot of spots he could fit because he could sort of play gap. He could play zone. I think he could do pretty well in power. So I think he fits in all the NFL run systems. It's just where is he going to end up? Is that spot going to give him, the most touches? Because we know there's going to be potentially some juicy fantasy landing spots for the wide receivers at the end of the first round with the Chiefs and Packers. Can he land in a spot where people aren't knocking him down the board from maybe 1-1 in non-super flex and 1-1-1-2 in super flex? I think there's a lot of good spots for him, and it's just the question of, is he going to end up on sort of one of the more elite offenses at the back of round 1, or is he going to end up on a slightly worse team at the top of round 2? But, that team could dedicate the run to him. And, there is a team like Pittsburgh, made that move for Najee last year that it could be pretty similar. The Bills could do that. I think he could end up with the Cardinals as well, but it's going to be one of these teams early in the second is my read on it. I really don't think we're getting a first round running back.
Merc. It's going to be Merc. That's what's going to happen. It's going to be the Jets. It's going to be some team like that that's going to Merc everything up. Yeah. You talked about Walker. You talked about Spiller. You talked about Breece Hall. Do you have like a favorite next tier running back prospect that's not really there? I like Pierre Strong a lot. I wish he had like 5 more pounds in each thigh, but I like Pierre Strong, like just the speed and kind of his natural running ability. Any kind of favorite next tier guy that we might see on day 2?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's fallen in love with James Cook right now. He's an explosive athlete. He's got a pass catching profile, but the overall size isn't there, so he needs to be like a 1B, change of pace back, James White plus in a committee with a focus on the pass game. So he's been rising up people's boards, and they think he's going to go second or third round. But I like the class a little bit in the late rounds, but guys all have their warts. I mean, Zamir White, Dameon Pierce, even Tyler Algier, Max Borgi. Like there's interesting guys up and down. But yeah, James Cook's been a little bit of the infatuation lately. I'm riding that train. But if I have to look even deeper than that, let's see who we got. Master Teague put on a show at the Ohio State Pro Day.
Yeah.
Heard all about that.
That's just a size speed freak who hasn't, gotten many touches and, sort of fell out of favor at Ohio State there. But that sort of style, and then Abram Smith out of Baylor, I'm liking both of those guys. I think Smith might end up being a little bit higher drafted than we initially think.
Well, I was going to ask you about kind of diving a little deeper, going into a sleeper that, someone like an Elijah Mitchell or a James Robinson, that we don't really see coming, and then all of a sudden comes on kind of at the end. Is there someone that you haven't mentioned that's there? I mean, you kind of touched on a lot of guys in that last little breath, but I figured I'd at least ask and see if maybe there was anyone out there that you think could be a secret guy. I mean, as far as fantasy, not in the actual draft, but maybe someone that is a later round guy that, maybe a third day guy that we can look for in fantasy that may surprise us.
Yeah, I think Tyrion Davis-Price out of LSU. He's a 6-foot back junior. He's still got some youth to him. He rushed for over 1,000 yards, for a down LSU team. He set the single game rush record for LSU this year. And he's sort of a guy that you see in between the tackles. He's got a little bit of juice. He's got a little bit of pass catching ability, and he just seems to do everything well. And he's got a little bit of just something that looks like he could pop. So he's a guy I like a little bit deeper, and who's starting to get some visits here. Might end up a little quicker than we thought. And he ran sub 4.540 at 211 pounds. His vertical jump wasn't all that impressive, and neither was his broad. But everything else, in the profile looks pretty good. He weighed a little bit more at his pro day, but failed to run there. But he's got a profile I'm a little bit intrigued by.
Well, I was also gonna, of course, touch on the Georgia guys, because I am a Georgia alum, in case anyone hasn't heard listening to the podcast. Actually, I'm sorry, back up. A reigning national championship Georgia alum.
That's right.
But, yeah, but no, you touched on Cook and Zamir Zeus White a little bit, but it's interesting. I find that yes, a lot of people have fallen in love with James Cook, and I think it's interesting, though. I think both of them are still a little bit undervalued, because I feel like a lot of people kind of look at the numbers and look at their usage, and they're not all the way there. And it's because Georgia, by design, doesn't have a lead back. I mean, it's been years and years and years of this where it's kind of no rhyme or reason. Like, they use them all at different times. And so I think that's kind of interesting, that I feel like they're both kind of undervalued. I'm excited, obviously, to see where they both land and what happens with them. But I think that Zeus is, he's not getting a lot of pub, and I love him. I'm excited about it. So,
yeah, he's got a great little profile, though. Averaged over nearly 5.5 yards a carry. Scored 11 touchdowns in each of the last 2 seasons. Has a little bit of versatility to his game. Wasn't called upon to be that pass catching back, but it's something I definitely think he could do. But he's one of those dudes that walks into a room and he's like, oh damn, he's got a little swole to his game. I wouldn't want to step in front of him. So he's physical. I think he's an interesting back that can also hold up in pass protection. I'm really liking both the Georgia backs. Very early when Zamir was recruited, I thought he was going to be like one of the top Devy players. That didn't turn out to be the exact truth, but he still showed up at the combine, at 214 pounds, ran a 4.4, had an impressive, first 10 yards split a 1.51. And he's just explosive. So I'm interested to see how he shakes out.
And just in keeping along those lines, I mean, of course, one of the things that we're going to do immediately after the draft is figure out, okay, well, what is the impact of some of these running backs going to be on their potential backfields? Like, once they get drafted to them, I'm almost 1,000% sure that's going to be an article that's going to be coming out within the first month, shortly after the draft. Luis, I know you're listening. But where do you think some of these, if not like the top 5 or so in like the way you have them ranked right now, but even some of the later round guys? So let's say like, I don't know, let's say if like the Buccaneers were to take a guy like Tyler Beatty, who he could be that maybe pass catching specialist. I mean, he had like 60 plus targets this past year, if I'm remembering right. Or let's say if the Chiefs wound up taking a guy like Brian Robinson, since he's like 225, close to 230 for like a goal line special, that sort of thing. So like those tools or those special skills that some of these running backs have, where do you see a couple of them landing where it could be kind of lights out for the veterans that are currently in place?
I don't know. Like, I don't think there's very many guys that are taking anyone out per se outside of the top 3. I think a lot of these backs are complementary backs, and I just don't know if teams are trying to hammer on redundancies anymore and trying to get more depth. But there's even talks about like Detroit really liking this class and Detroit really liking James Cook.
No,
like
no.
Why?
Don't let that-
Why?
I don't have great answers for you, but there's a couple of these going on right now where you're scratching your head and you're thinking, like, do you really have to do this to me?
Right.
The Giants really like a couple of the backs, so maybe Saquon finally gets a little bit of a spell, even though I thought Booker played pretty well there last year.
Talk about a good Zamir White landing spot.
Yeah.
The Giants, oof.
There's a couple just guys I think are going to see their projections drop 2, maybe 3 touches, and it's going to be one of those things that play out through the course of a season.
Mm-hmm.
How scared should I be as a Devin Singletary truther?
I mean, I think they're taking a back. The question is, do they take one of the big 3 or not for me? Like, because, Singletary was good there, but, Zach Moss, had a game or 2 and flashed some PPR points that really, didn't amount into much production from the run game. And I also think they're trying to get away, as Josh Allen ages, from using him as the battering ram. They know they can't get away with that all the time, and they have to, keep that one in their back pockets a little more. So I think a good in between the tackle runner, so we've also got to remember when talking about the Bills specifically that they wanted to draft Travis Etienne last year, but the Jaguars sort of ruined that for them. So they were ready with their first round pick last year to select. So make that selection. So it's kind of like they're so close to doing it. I just don't know if I'm going to believe it until I see it because of how, great that organization has built the team. And, maybe we're going to see that spill over onto the Giants with their hires and Joe Shane and Brian Dable.
I need a BuzzFeed like top 10 list of the things the Jaguars ruined last year. And I feel like only half of them would be football related. I feel like that would be the case. Anthony, do you do best ball?
Yeah, I do. I haven't started yet because of,
you're not a degenerate like us.
No. Well,
it's okay.
My draft responsibilities, sort of keep me out of the
Fair
game.
enough.
But I am missing on the opportunities to draft these young guys before they end up, boosting up the boards by landing in, some favorable spots.
I saw Kenneth Walker go in the 3rd round in a best ball tourney that I entered in a best ball draft that I entered, and I went, wow! Like even if he lands in best case scenario, that's still tough. Like he went ahead of a lot of guys that we know are starting right now. But
that's rich. Maybe they know something.
Which is a good time to say, if you want to play Underdog, anybody out there doesn't have an Underdog account, go in, get some early best ball action. We have a promo. You deposit $10 into a new Underdog account, get a deposit bonus match, and a 4-for-4 Pro subscription. So it's a great deal if you want to get that Pro subscription. You're on the fence about best ball. Come and enjoy. Check out some of those draft lobbies. Just enter 4-for-4, 4FOR4 in the promo code box. So, Anthony, let's talk quarterbacks a little bit. Running backs obviously are going to be the prime picks, and that's why I wanted to dedicate the most time to that. But this class of quarterbacks is very interesting to me because of the lack of a Trevor Lawrence. How is this class? How do you see this class going into it?
I mean, this class is one of the weakest we've had, but it's still got some interesting players. We also got to remember we're sort of in a new age of quarterback. We've got a bunch of guys who are very athletic. Outside of Carson Strong, all of these guys can really move in the pocket. They've got some speed outside of it, which gives us a little bit of Konami aspects. We've got everything we're looking for from fantasy quarterbacks. It's just right now, I don't know how many of these guys are better than the 40th or 50th best quarterbacks in the league. Yeah. So it's, they're good. It's just we've got to see them take that next step and become, top 20 players, if not, if they have more than that. But this class has grades that aren't favorable to last year. Malik Willis, who's my top quarterback in this class, I think I'd rank him QB5 or QB6, excuse me. I do love his, all around game. He's got a big arm. He's got, speed to burn. He can use his legs inside, outside of the pockets, but he's also got a lot of warts, and he's got some tools, and he's got to learn how to, sort of play the game at the NFL level. So many are expecting him to hopefully land in a spot where he could take some time and, sit behind hopefully a good quarterback, but more likely a Mitchell Trubisky, and just take some time and, iron out more of the reads and progressions.
Shots fired at Mitchell Trubisky. I like that.
I mean, I'm a Chicago Bear fan, I guess.
Oh, fair enough.
You used to be. Like we've soured a little bit, but
as a Bears fan, when I look at Malik Willis, and I've been looking at draft prospects for a long time, but I haven't paid as much attention. It's more like casual for me the last couple of years. I wanted to ask you, my Malik Willis scouting, for lack of a better word, I see him as very similar to the flaws I saw in Justin Fields last year. And I liked Justin Fields, but except all the positives that you see with Malik Willis are at Liberty, whereas all the positives we saw with Justin Fields were at Ohio State. So it's easier to tell a narrative of a top 10 pick. And I like Malik Willis. I'm excited about him. He blew up the combine. But do you see those same problems with the blitz and problems with accuracy on the run and problems with plays breaking down around him and being able to continue to make plays with his arms? Or am I off base?
I mean, the main knocks on him are sort of, progression and took far too many sacks. Like his sack rate was basically double anybody else in the country, but he also just didn't have dudes around him. Like we say he played at Liberty as a knock on his opponents, but we should also knock those around him.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
They weren't those dudes either, but he's a former Auburn commit who got some play there, looked pretty good athletically. So you saw that his athleticism was at play with these guys in a Power 5 conference. So his athleticism is NFL elite at the quarterback position. There's no doubt. It's just, can he progress? Can he make reads? And when he's making reads, can he get the ball off quick enough to not get sacked at the NFL level?
And so building off of that, we want to try and figure out who those guys are that are going to provide the most fantasy value, like right out of the gate. And I think either Malik Willis with the rushing upside, Desmond Ridder also with the rushing upside. He ran like a 4.5 or something like that, if I'm remembering right.
Yep.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we've got the Konami code in those couple of guys. And so I wanted to ask you about them and what their fantasy outlook, or I guess where we could see those guys like possibly getting us to the point where we want to draft them, or like what is the ideal situation for those guys. Well, let's talk about the prototypical pocket passers. And we've got guys that could possibly kind of create that same type of fantasy value. Let's say maybe a guy like Matt Corral or Sam Howell I mean, because those guys, they come from heavy RPO schemes, which can be, at least at the NFL level, useful for fantasy if they're efficient enough and accurate enough in order to get the ball to their receivers. So I guess out of like the top 5 of this class, I mean, what are the, I guess, ideal situations you can see them landing in?
I mean, here's the thing. These guys are all sort of athletic. Like, Kenny Pickett's got a RAS at 9.52. He ran a 4.73, which wasn't, the fastest, but it's still...
He was the one that did the fake slide, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We've seen the fake slide, like, that's at least legit speed. He had a strong vertical, had a strong broad jump, over 10 foot for a quarterback is very, very strong. He was good in the shuttle. The main knock on Kenny Pickett is, hand size. So some teams won't even have him on a board because of, certain established thresholds. That's just a matter of fact. Some teams will, and some teams also, he meets all the commandments of, Bill Parcells. He's a longtime starter. He's got a certain number of starts. His TD to interception ratio is better than 2 to 1. He won like 67% of his games and yada, yada, yada. So, Ritter also meets that, and they're both athletic, but you see a little bit of a stronger 40 time out of Ritter, and that gives him a little bit more in the athletic, community, I guess you could say, is he's getting a little bit of a boost there, but they're pretty similar athletes. And then Matt Corral didn't, compete in any of these, but we saw his game change a little bit, used his legs a lot more, and sort of cut back on those interceptions to where, maybe he can be a complement or an eventual successor to a Ryan Tannehill down the line. Like, the guys are... I think that Tennessee spot at the end of the first round is going to be a spot potentially for a quarterback. And, Tannehill might be on some thin ice as they try to figure out if they can build something around Derrick Henry. And, when the rest of the AFC is loading up, you've got to make at least some move to, take that next step. But these guys are all talented. Howell had to use his legs a lot more when he lost basically his top 3 pass catchers to the NFL, top 2 running backs to the NFL last year, and
running for his life too.
Yeah, and that's not to mention the offensive line, what they did to him, his sack rate. So these guys all have warts and all have question marks. That's why I say they're probably the 40th to 50th best quarterbacks in the league right now. They all deserve to be, drafted, but in another year, if these classes were combined, I don't know if any of these guys get drafted in the first round last year. So it's going to be interesting to see, and it's going to be interesting to see who kicks the can down the road a year for the class we have coming next.
Based on what you just said, there's not a lot of redraft action, I don't think, from quarterbacks in this draft class. I mean, I would think, I guess, if someone if Malik Willis somehow ended up in, Seattle and actually was able to, use that big arm for DK and Lockett, maybe you could justify taking him at some point. But I don't know. I think these guys are kind of, late round stabs in best ball and stay away in redraft. It's kind of what it looks like to me.
Yeah, I mean, these guys are going to be so landing spot dependent. I mean, the prime position that everybody looks at is, sort of Carolina at 6. Your competition is Sam Darnold, and we'll just say your competition is Sam Darnold.
I looked up my draft notes on Sam Darnold. I was getting lazy by 2018, and it just says meh. Like, when I go to Sam,
you were spot on, though, Brandon. Yeah, spot on. Nailed it.
His feet are definitely meh. So, but Ben McAdoo is making news today. Talking about Sam Darnold is our starting quarterback, and then retracting 90 seconds later.
I shouldn't have said that.
My bad. I don't know if that's the plan or not.
Good old McAdoo.
But the bro flow was on fire for Mac today, so we got to give him that.
Staggs, where are some spots outside of Carolina where you might pique interest, whether it's a late round best ball stab like Jen mentioned, or perhaps a some sort of redraft kind of look or something? Any other spot outside of Carolina, like is Atlanta interesting, or Houston, any of those other spots?
I sort of think right now everyone has their starting quarterback except for maybe Carolina. It seems weird.
It does seem that way.
But I guess teams aren't willing to take that chance and only have, the rookie. But all the rookies, need a little bit of work. So people will want them to sit. The question is, like, could he end up in Seattle and, be in a competition with Drew Lock and Geno Smith, and end up getting some time there? Sure, but they also, tried to start Matt Flynn over Russell Wilson his rookie
Drew
year. Like, crazier things happen prior to the draft, and like position battles shake out, and absolutely Seattle could just go with an all run based offense, run QB power, go rookie Cam Newton style. If they really think they're a contender, they could absolutely do that. But do I think it's the most logical thing, or is it what I'm expecting as of today? No, but I'd be interested in seeing Malik Willis end up in Seattle and just go full Cam Newton style.
That'd be fun.
It'd be interesting, and we know how that turned out for fantasy. While we are a little bit deeper at the position now, it still was a massive rookie season in terms of total points.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Chris, real quick, Dynasty, where are you? I know you're more of a Dynasty player than Jen is. Where are you looking at these quarterbacks?
So for the most part, like Malik Willis, you can have that conversation about taking him inside the top 3, but then after that, it really is more of a toss-up. I've seen conversations of folks arguing even in Superflex, taking the running backs, like the top 2 running backs ahead of Malik Willis, just because, like Staggs was saying, it is really landing spot dependent on even if these guys will see the field. Because if the league essentially makes this handshake agreement saying that these guys all have their warts on them and we'll let them sit behind an established veteran for a year while we help develop them, then let's just go ahead and wind up drafting, or like from a dynasty standpoint, take the running backs ahead of them. Breece Hall, take them ahead of them, and especially the wide receivers that are most likely going to be drafted at 104, let's say through 109, and all that's more or less going to be landing spot dependent as well. Like, where is Drake London going to go? Jameson Williams, Garrett. I mean, all those guys, the top 5, top 6 that most folks have like for this class. So for for where I'm looking at right now, if you're sitting at like the 103, it kind of sucks, to be quite honest, because there is so much, I guess, unknown as to where some of these folks are going to value the quarterbacks, that it's almost easier to try and move back at that point because it just doesn't have the same value as it has in years past.
Yeah, makes sense. I'm going to ask one more question of each of you, okay? Gun to your head, May 1st, what team does Baker Mayfield play for on May 1st? Staggs, let's start with you.
Dead. At this point, like, he's done so much to alienate everybody that, like, I don't know where he's going to end up, but, your 2 logical, teams we've talked about are Carolina and Seattle. So,
yeah,
I think it's going to be Carolina. They've stressed for I don't know how long that they wanted a veteran option, that the rookies really weren't for them. The rookies really weren't for them. So, maybe they had Baker Mayfield take a tackle at 6 and then, roll into the season like that and evaluate, for the future. And if they have to, sell the farm for a top guy next year.
Yeah, I like that. Chris?
I was gonna say insert USFL team here. That was gonna be my answer. Because I'm with Anthony on that one. I mean, there's been so much that's come out about like his time in Cleveland. He didn't report to the voluntary workouts. Not that anybody expected him to anyway. But if there's so much like the mutual disinterest that was put out between him and Carolina just like 6 weeks ago or so. I mean, that
Yeah.
seems to be the mutual disinterest with him and the rest of the teams in the league as well. So
yeah, like Robbie Anderson came out was like, I don't want Baker Mayfield here. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
nice.
yeah, so if they really can't find a trade, I can just see them just like, hey, I mean, thanks for your time, and there's the door.
Yeah,
We ain't got
Jen.
nothing else for you.
Well, just for fun, I'm going to go with the Jets because why not?
Nice.
You know, Zach Wilson, we don't know what he is, so maybe they'll bring him in to as a veteran-ish presence.
It's interesting. It's not one of the more outlandish ones I've heard.
I mean,
Yeah.
I like that. I'm going to throw Tampa in there. I feel like
I like that.
a year grooming behind Tom Brady. I feel like Baker might be okay with that.
I don't know if Tom will be doing that. I don't know.
He probably won't care.
That.
Tom,
Yeah.
I don't know that Tom would get, because I don't think Tom would view it as here's a competition. I think he would view it as,
it's not competition, but I don't know if he wants
Yeah.
to deal with him like in the
No,
locker
that
room
could
and
be.
whatnot.
Yeah.
That's
Mhm.
possible. It's
Yeah.
possible. Okay. All right.
Imagine Baker Mayfield with a ring just for being on the Buccaneers.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be brutal.
I mean, I think it's a good fit. He's Baker Mayfield had a big arm, and now people are remembering Baker Mayfield, like with this shoulder injury, and that's just not who Baker was.
Yeah.
So we've got to remember back to him as a prospect. He had a cannon. He could really put some heat behind the ball. So I'd like to see, and you get that sort of aspect of having a year to get the stink off of you, like. Look how it turned out for Mitchell Trubisky.
Yeah.
He got a lot more guaranteed than I think anybody, thought. And if he could, play a good soldier for a year, maybe while Tom, has his revenge tour sans Bruce Arians, because Tom Brady don't need no coach. That's about it at this point.
Yeah.
That's all Tom's got left to prove.
Yeah.
Anthony, you wanted to bring up Deebo Samuel. What should we think of the whole Deebo Samuel drama and what's going on?
I don't know. Apparently, we need to take it to Facebook and ask his brother.
Oh yeah, I heard about that.
Fill me in. Fill me in.
His brother said basically, they're asking for a trade. The camp is asking for a trade from San Francisco. So, that could be something that throws a big wrench into some of these mock drafts, late in the game. A team like San Francisco or Tennessee or even Seattle, with DK Metcalf and AJ Brown and all those guys looking for these big deals, after sort of getting that. There's sort of two aspects to it that are interesting from a draft perspective, because these were guys who were all second round picks. So now they don't have that cost controlled fifth year.
Yeah.
So this contract is now a bigger thing. So maybe we see some of these pass catchers who we think are early second round picks maybe sneak into the end of the first as teams want a little bit more cost control.
That's a good point.
That's going to be a little bit, an interesting thing to watch. And then, does Deebo maybe fetch the 10th overall pick, from the Jets, and they get a little bit of a more sure thing rather than having to, get Jameson Williams or Drake London or Garrett Wilson in town and trying to get him up to speed. Maybe they get a little bit more of a sure thing who worked, with the play caller LaFleur in San Francisco previously. So Deebo could be on the move, and I think there's going to be a lot of teams vying for him. For his own fantasy, stakes, I don't know if there's going to be a team that's going to give him 8 to 10 inside the tackle rushes. That exists in the NFL.
Miami, trade Tyreek Hill for Deebo Samuel. Do that, please. Let me not root for Tyreek Hill this year. That would be nice. Jen, is there a spot you'd like to see Deebo end up?
I mean, I haven't thought about it till this very second, but I think, talking about giving, like you said, giving him rushing. I mean, Atlanta would be interesting because he would. I mean, I guess they already have Patterson, so I guess they don't really need another guy like that. But
that's future Hall of Famer Cordero Patterson.
Yes, of course.
Correct.
Put some respect on the name. I'm with you. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting. I think it's strange because it kind of screws San Francisco if they were to go ahead and do that, because then they have Kittle and that's pretty much it. I mean, of course, Ayuk is there, but I feel like, I don't know. I'm not sure that they would. It's one of those things, right? I mean, if someone wants to leave, you kind of want to deal them and let them go. But at the same time, they kind of can't afford to let them go because they need them. So I don't know.
Yeah. Crazy contract discussions with guys on rookie deals. Kind of new, not really something that's been a prominent thing. So kind of interesting. We have gone about 45 minutes, so I'm gonna let each of you go on to your respective evenings. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. Listeners should definitely read Anthony's mock and his big board at 4for4.com. Keep it bookmarked. Keep checking back for updates until draft next week. And follow Anthony on Twitter at StagsNFL. Anthony, any final thoughts or plugs before we go?
Now I'm excited to get to this draft and get to the live show, talk with Daigle and Mr. Paulson about all the fantasy relevant guys, because I think we're going to see, there's rumors, though, that we could see a top 10 without a guy who touches the ball. And that's kind of crazy for fantasy, but I do think one will either go at 10 or, at some point before that. So I don't think we're going to be too out of our element early in the round. So I'm excited to do the draft show, and we've got a lot of draft and betting content centered around the draft coming out in the next, week or so. I guess we're getting closer than I think here.
We
gotta play. I gotta plan some time. But I'm just excited for it.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much again. And thank you, Chris and Jen. Always a pleasure. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. Listeners, you can follow us on Twitter at The Monday Mommy, at Chris Allen FFWX, at Stags NFL, and at Two Guys Brandon. Thanks so much for checking us out. Have a good day.